All right, our first breakout room time was successful.
Yay.
Yay. All right. So we're going to go around the room and we're going to share just what that was like for you. So what was meaningful about just being listened to, and what did you learn about yourself in that minute? Who wants to go?
I'll start.
Thanks, Stacy.
So I was listening and I had so many questions. I was partnered with Kanika and she has a totally different life than I do, lives in a different country, and I wanted to ask more about her life. So I had a really hard time kind of reining back my questions and really just focusing on what she was saying. So I think for me, I will really need to kind of get a baseline down with people before we start talking about issues, because I want to get to know somebody.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this later, but I love the idea of, like, before you get into coaching, just really having a discovery session where you just like connect, get to know each other, or talk about coaching before actually doing it. It's so fun to just get to know someone, and then you can coach them and still ask questions too. But I'm a big fan of that. All right. Thanks, JC. All right. Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I was implicitly trying to do the level 2 listening from the recordings, and I realized that it's hard. But yeah, I mean, it was. I was trying to put myself in her shoes and all that theory that I just read about. But yeah, I too had a lot of questions. It helps that I'm a talkative person, so listening is hard. But yeah, tried my best.
Yeah, awesome. And I just want to remind you guys, and I don't know if the book says this, but I always was taught that level 2 listening and level 3 listening, those are the muscles, and you have to work them out to get them stronger. And so we're all working them out. We're all practicing. So it's not something where, I'm instantly really good at this. It takes work. It literally takes work to be able to do it. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right. What about you, Sarah?
Oh, well, I loved it. It was, it's funny being able to see yourself when you're listening to someone on the video, because then I was like, am I making too many friends? Like, I was trying to be really calm and just listening and taking everything in and focusing on what she was saying. But I was also worried that I was like too excited or animated, or I don't know. That was sort of my toughness. But I loved what you were telling me. And so, because I connected with that as well. So it was interesting. A lot of self-awareness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Robin?
I basically tried to ask a question at first, and then I realized I had forgotten, it was about the level 2 listening aspect of things. But I too understand the benefit of that introductory time where you get to know somebody a little bit. I am a personal trainer and a Group X instructor, so when I do personal training, we have that first half hour of discovery, if you will, and getting to know the person. So once I realized my flub and stopped talking and kind of covered my mouth, I really listened intently to her, and she was very excited about what she was telling me about, and I know she's going to have a great time, and it was very informative.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Thanks, Robin. All right. What about you, Raja?
I think for me personally, it's easier to listen than it is to speak. It's kind of awkward to speak for a minute. You feel like you're on the spot. You feel like, am I saying the right thing? Is this the right topic? Are they even listening to me? And then just being naturally inquisitive, I just automatically had questions right off the bat, but I had to, of course, contain them. But yeah, it's, for me, just personally, it's easier to listen because I don't like to talk as much.
Yeah. And Asia, as you were going, you shared information that I was like, I wanted to ask more questions about it, but it was like, but I think it's interesting. I guess I was personally reminded that it's harder to talk about yourself sometimes. And I noticed I didn't even want to look at the computer screen. It was just interesting. I was like, huh. Maybe that's the thing with me too, Sarah. Like I'm noticing, oh, I'm making this funny expression. But yeah, it's interesting. Just getting a refresher in it. But very cool. All right, what about you, Mike?
Yeah, I found it really interesting. I think the act of response and the element of interactivity is a natural part of conversation, and it's probably something that we, in normal situations, consider an act of courtesy. You know, to respond, to say, yeah, I know what you're with, and to respond with questions and things like that. And so to shift into a purely responsive mode without, giving back in the form of a question was kind of difficult. I think normally that kind of silence might come across as discourteous, but in a coaching context, that becomes an act of focus and a key element of productivity. So it was interesting. Like everybody else, I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to break in. I wanted to interrupt and say, "Oh, well, tell me more about that." But by not doing so, you were able to focus much more on what was being said. So.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Like it makes you realize how much you love asking questions, right? As well, like,
right.
How easily like so many come, and I think that's why it's so cool to do this one. And then the powerful questions, because we're all like, yes, I can finally ask questions. The exercise we're going to do.
Yeah.
Very cool. And
that definitely supports what was said in the book, that coaching is 80% listening and 20% talking. So.
Yeah, and when you think about like not talking, don't think about, oh, you're being quiet, because there's a lot going on. Like you're absorbing what they're saying, and there's also something called like holding space, and that's what I normally refer to when like you're like listening and you're just holding space and letting them kind of just express what's going on. And usually, if you can pause, it's amazing. Someone will, if they stop talking and you don't say something right away, a lot of times they continue talking. And it's amazing this like what they self-process and almost coach themselves and work through something just by you holding space. So just because you're quiet doesn't mean, oh, it's just silence. There's a lot happening in that silence. It is, like you said, Mike, really beneficial and productive. But questions are a very key part as well, which we're going to get into next. Ed, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm a good listener. And I'm good at talking too. And this is very interesting to see a different view for the whole process, But for me, the challenge is understand what is the right question. When you quote somebody, what is the best question? What is the right question? Make direction for that question, and go deep with what the guy wants, what the people want, I don't know if you're making me clear.
Yeah, you are. So you're talking about the importance of asking the right question to help the client
Exactly.
where they want to go.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, the key words is making the right question, because the whole work is that.
Yeah, and space and being quiet and giving yourself time to formulate the right question can be really, really helpful too. Just giving yourself like, just to reframe it and make sure you're using like the right words. Because sometimes, I know for me, sometimes in the beginning of coaching, like I would process what I was thinking about asking and then ask it and then get to what I really wanted to ask. And so if you pause, even if it's like a couple of seconds, and formulate the question in your mind, sometimes it's a lot more powerful, because there's not your like, I'm going to ask, you're explaining the question as you're asking it. So that's something too. But thank you, Ed. That's a really good thought. And as we think about questions, we're thinking about just simple, curious, powerful questions, because they're short and they're sweet and they usually get right to it. So they're not, in coaching, we talk about they're not dressed up. Like they're not, coded with an explanation with a, do you mind if I ask this? And all of that all in one. It's just like, what is it? It's very straight to the point. So the first exercise we're going to do today, and I'm going to give you guys examples. So another exercise we're going to do is actually asking different questions starting with different things. So we're going to do a couple minutes of just asking questions that start with what, then a couple minutes of questions that just start with why, and then the last couple minutes is starting with how. So this is really what we're going to do in breakout rooms, but first I'm going to kind of model this for you guys, or talk about what it's going to look like. So I know on page 43 there's a whole list of some powerful questions, but it's okay because we're all learning together, and you can pause and reformulate a question if you don't have it starting with the right word. This isn't necessarily important to coaching. It's just the importance of asking questions in different ways, because a lot of times, and I've noticed that sometimes we can have different tendencies when we ask questions. So like sometimes there'll be people that put the word do in front of their questions automatically without thinking about it sometimes, or so, and then asking a question. Sometimes it's how we process it. So when we're thinking about, okay, we're going to start with what, you can see what questions come out of that, how, what, what you really can come up with the how question, and then why as well. Obviously there's other things, like if you were to do this, or after that, what does this look like? There's a limited amount of questions, but in thinking about powerful questions, they're open-ended. They're usually 10 words or less. They're precise. And I know usually they say what, how, why, what if. But just simple and brief. Just don't think about coming up with a perfect question, because the less you worry about the perfect question, the more perfect your questions will be. It's kind of a weird thing, but just being curious. Like, oh, so what would happen if this way? Just being really curious. And when you do that, it's amazing what comes out of it. And I always refer to it as kind of trusting the process of coaching, is just being curious. So when you had your level 2 listening ears on and all those questions were coming to mind, it's about like, okay, I'm really curious. I really want to ask this, and then just following your intuition and just being curious and using less words, and they have more of an impact. So that is what we're doing. So page 43 does have some examples if you guys need some prompts, but I would just encourage you just to be curious. It doesn't have to be perfect questions. It's more of like just practicing. And the nice thing is we're going to go back with our original groups. So you probably already have some things you want to ask and build your conversation off. But some ideas for you guys are, what do you want to work on today? What's most important to you? What's the benefit? What is the cost? What happens if you fail? What if you knew you could not fail? What else? I love the what else question. And there's actually a rule in coaching, or not a rule, but almost like an exercise where you ask what else 3 times, like when someone's telling you something. It's something I learned several years back, even before Coach Training EDU. It's like, they share about something and say, instead of saying like, oh, tell me more about that, or okay, thanks for sharing, just really digging in and asking what else, is kind of like in a group of 3, like 3 times. And it's amazing that a lot of things come out. But like, what do you want to move forward? What specifically about X is most exciting for you, or what's your ideal solution? What questions are pretty easy. For why, why does that matter, or why or why not? Why do you want to move forward? Why are you taking this class? Why does this matter to you? And there's so many different ways you could formulate that. And then how, how is that going to affect you? Or how is doing this, how does that align with your values? How do you know you will be successful? And so on. And so I would just encourage you guys to give yourself a little bit of, just don't worry about like perfect questions, and just practice being really curious. And it's okay if you pause for a second and just formulate a question. So what we're gonna do is 5 minutes of what, 3 minutes of why, and then 5 more minutes of how. So you have 13 minutes.
Sorry.
Paige, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you. Yeah, usually if you're not talking, you'd want to be muted just so that the sound, sound's not picking up for everyone else. So does that make sense? We're gonna do 13 minutes and then you'll switch. So it's 26 minutes total in breakout rooms, and then we'll have time to debrief after that. And then we'll be able to talk more about it and things like that. So like I said, don't worry about the perfect question. I invite you guys all to really embrace a growth mindset. So growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is that, hey, I can learn and jump in and grow from this and expand my skills even if I'm not normally this kind of, I don't normally jump in, versus a fixed is like, oh, I am all that I can be. I can't do that. It's kind of very fixed on like what your current skills are. Versus growth is a growth mindset is, hey, let's jump in and give it a shot. Don't have to be perfect. I'll figure it out. And just embrace the fact that maybe, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be really beneficial. And, the less you try to be clever and brilliant, the better coach you'll be. And I'm speaking from experience. When I was in training a couple years ago, John would literally stop me when I was coaching and be like, Hannah, stop being cute, because I wanted to come up with a clever, cute question, or something was really like tied things together, and he like would point it out. And when I let go of that, it was really hard just because I like clever questions in general. It felt like it was just easier and there's less pressure and there was just more space to coach and just be curious and be present with the client. So I just invite you guys all to do that. Do you guys have any questions before we go to this next exercise about powerful questions? You guys are all following? Okay. All right. So if you want to be refreshed, so page 42 gives you the steps for asking powerful questions. This really is, just being curious, starting with what, why, and then how, simple and brief. Just one question, make yourself stop talking, give your client, that space and that time to think and process, and then listen, and then ask another question based on that. So you'll want to probably time yourself. So 5 minutes of what, 3 minutes of why, and 5 minutes of how, and then switch. And probably what I'll do is just give you guys a half hour. So it's, if you want to have like a couple 2-minute buffer or something like that, just so you can end in an easy place or discuss before you switch or however that works. So it'll be 13 minutes, but I'll bring you guys back in a half hour. So you'll have a couple minutes buffer in between. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording